Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Joanne Blanchfield, and I have the honour of being the current Director of the Biotechnology programs in the School of Chemistry and Molecular Biosciences at the University of Queensland. And this fabulous person here is my colleague, Dr. Lisette Prigel, who is the current Deputy Director of the programs. And it is our great pleasure to welcome everybody to just the beginning of our 25 in 25 celebration of biotechnology education at the University of Queensland. We are clearly not the first people to gather on this beautiful reach of the mighty Brisbane River for the purposes of celebration and community. And so on behalf of the University of Queensland and everyone here, I joyfully acknowledge the traditional owners and their custodianship of this magnificent land on which we meet. I acknowledge their ancestors and their descendants who continue spiritual and cultural connection to country. I pay my respects to them, and I acknowledge the enormous contribution that their community has made to Australian and global society. We are delighted to welcome everybody here, and especially the Vice-Chancellor of Queensland University, Professor Deborah Terry, our very learned panel members who you'll meet in a moment, and of course our moderator for tonight, Professor Paul Young. And a very special welcome to all biotechnology alumni here tonight. Welcome back.
25 in 25 marks the 25th anniversary of the biotechnology programs as we know them today. 25 years ago, our first graduates of the newly rebadged Bachelor of Biotechnology enrolled in the program, and there are a few of those graduates here tonight. So please, thank you and welcome back. Since then, a lot has changed. A lot of what we considered back then, and at least to me, as science fiction, has become reality. And our esteemed panel will reflect on some of these amazing achievements in the coming hour this evening. But there are some things that have not changed. The spirit and enthusiasm of our students and our alumni, the camaraderie and the friendships that have been built, and a love of science and scientific thinking. Now, to formally welcome you all tonight and officially open this event and the proceedings to follow, we would like to now invite Professor Deborah Terry AC, Vice-Chancellor and President of the University of Queensland, to the stage.
Thank you very much, Joanne and Lisette. And it's wonderful to see so many people here tonight. Can I begin by also acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we're meeting here and paying my respects and our respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to acknowledge representatives from our partners in government and industry, our generous friends and donors, UQ colleagues, students and alumni, one and all. And as I say, wonderful to see so many people here. Thank you for joining us here this evening to celebrate this really important milestone, 25 years of teaching students in the biotechnology programs run by UQ. Tonight is an opportunity to reflect on the bold academic idea that we launched at the turn of the century and to celebrate the global impact that has followed. But more than that, it's a chance to look ahead and consider the vast potential of the graduates of our biotechnology programs to help address global challenges and to shape a better future for us all, both here in Australia and globally. Now, while biotechnology-related subjects and a biotech major in the Bachelor of Applied Science had been offered at UQ for some time, the Faculty of Science took the pioneering decision in 1999 to introduce a dedicated Bachelor of Biotechnology degree. The idea from the outset was to offer a degree program that helps students to hone their knowledge and their skills in very practical ways at the intersection of science, technology and business. In doing so, UQ helped to define the curriculum for an entirely new academic discipline here in Australia. From an initial cohort of just 27 students in 2000, UQ's Bachelor of Biotechnology has grown considerably in terms of both its scale and impact. Last year, for instance, we enrolled 276 students across our undergraduate biotech programs, with a further 70 in the dual engineering honours and biotechnology degree. The growth in postgraduate enrolments over the past 25 years is even more impressive. From an inaugural intake of just 6 students in the master's program to the 418 students that we enrolled across our suite of postgraduate biotech programs last year. It really is an impressive growth. I'm proud to say that UQ was one of the pioneers in terms of opening up this field of study. By doing so, we recognised the pressing need for a science-based program that focused on the deployment of science to meet society's needs. Because, as we all know, biotechnology is much more than academic inquiry, but of course academic inquiry underpins the breakthroughs in biotechnology. It's about tapping into scientific know-how and deploying technology to create real-world solutions. It's about improving crop yields and food security, creating life-saving therapies, driving innovations in renewable energy, cleaning up environmental contamination, accelerating manufacturing capabilities, and enabling governments to better protect public health, biosecurity, and sustainability. That's what biotechnology does. It turns scientific discovery into genuine impact. And that's why these programs have broad global appeal. Our biotechnology programs attract students from China, India, Singapore, Malaysia, many of whom have gone on to lead transformative projects in their home countries. And similarly, many of our domestic graduates have found success across the globe, contributing to international health initiatives, energy transitions, and of course, the important work to address sustainable development goals. The success of these programs is also due to a very conscious decision made early on to build deep and genuine partnerships between academia and industry. In fact, I think one of the most distinctive features of UQ's biotechnology programs is the active role played by our industry and government partners as co-creators. They help shape the curriculum. They offer placements and real-world experiences. They participate directly in the teaching, sharing insights, challenges, and opportunities from the front lines of business and public policy. This input helps to ensure that our students and our graduates are job-ready by the time they graduate, able to hit the ground running with skills in quality assurance, manufacturing, compliance, IP, and strategic thinking. And it also ensures that our research and teaching stay relevant, informed by the needs and expectations of the sectors that we aim to serve. Now, of course, none of this success would be possible without the people behind the programs, the academics, the teachers, the researchers, professional staff, industry collaborators, and students who have all contributed to building something really quite exceptional. I'd particularly like to acknowledge the contributions of the 4 directors of our biotechnology programs over the past 25 years, and my sincere thanks and our sincere thanks to Emeritus Professor Ross Barnard, Professor Avril Robertson, Professor David Asher, and of course the current director, Professor Joanne Blanchfield. Now, unfortunately, as many of you will know, Avril has sent her apologies this evening. I believe she's very close to Everest Base Camp at the moment, so we wish her all the best. But it's wonderful to have Ross, David and Joanne all here for this celebration. By its very nature, biotechnology is a team endeavour, and it truly has been the collaborative spirit of our hard-working team that has underpinned our reputation in this field and contributed to UQ's position among the world's top 10 universities for biotechnology for much of the past decade. That's an amazing achievement. So tonight, I think we're marking much more than a milestone in a teaching program. We're celebrating a quarter of a century of vision, partnership and impact. So thank you once again for all being here this evening, and I hope you have a great night reconnecting with colleagues, old friends and collaborators. But before we get into that, it's my great pleasure to introduce the moderator of this evening's panel discussion on biotech innovation. And for this audience, he really is someone who needs no introduction. So please join me in welcoming to the stage Emeritus Professor Paul Young. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Terry. Look, sorry, just stunned when you first walk up here and see this audience. So lots and lots of familiar faces as well as and friends. Welcome here. Those alumni, congratulations on being alumni of one of the best programs in the world, and welcome back. So wonderful to see you all here. I might start off with a huge thanks to the science faculty team for all the work they put into the evening's wonderful event. A special shout out to Brenda Tournier and her team. So hello everyone, and welcome to this University of Queensland celebration and all things biotech. My name, as you've just heard, is Paul Young, an Emeritus Professor at UQ. Just your fancy way of saying I'm now retired. I actually did look up the absolute direct Latin translation, and it says, having served out one's time. It sounds like a prison sentence, but anyway. I'm enjoying no admin and enjoying being able to have all the fun of dealing with science. So I too would like to begin by acknowledging the Turrbal and Yugara peoples as the original owners and custodians of the land on which we meet today, and pay my respects to their ancestors and descendants. This land has been a space for gatherings and collaboration for tens of thousands of years, and in the context of our gathering today, it's fitting to also acknowledge the First Nations peoples as the first scientists, makers and innovators on this land. Indeed, it could be argued that Indigenous communities have practiced forms of biotechnology for millennia through their traditional knowledge around the use and processing of native plants for food, for medicine, food sustainability and land management. But today we're going to be discussing some of the breakthroughs, challenges and opportunities that arise from our more modern concept of biotechnology. The title of our panel discussion tonight is Biotech, Past, Present and Future. And with an amazing panel, as you all discover, an amazing panel of experts, we will be celebrating the last 25 years of the Biotech program at UQ by exploring some of the past highlights and future challenges and prospects for the biotech landscape more broadly. For me personally, there is also a nice symmetry to the discussion tonight, as my career began 50 years ago, some 25 years before the Biotech program came into being, and at roughly the same time that many would argue was also the birth of modern biotechnology, our ability to manipulate DNA directly, the discovery of restriction enzymes that could act like scissors to cut DNA, and the ability to then clone that DNA and replicate it inside bacterial cells. It was revolutionary at the time. And it changed everything in biology, and the technology became known in those early days as genetic engineering. We don't often use that term now. So in 1975, I was in my third year of undergrad. Please don't do the math. And I fondly remember the course I took in molecular genetics. The course academic was Dr. Jonathan Mainsbridge, an ex-ballet dancer. I know, the overlap of arts and science, who would have thought? That's another topic, and I could spend a whole day chatting with you about that. I do with my daughter regularly, who is in the arts industry. the spark of creativity that is the foundation of both the arts and the sciences. But back to Dr. Mainsbridge. All that semester, he would come bounding into the class, and when I say bound, he would bound into the class, flourishing the latest Nature or Science journal, excitedly exclaiming, "You won't believe what they've discovered now." He taught us from those papers and not the textbook that year. He dumped it, taught directly from the latest publications. It was heady stuff, and I guess my career is in part down to his enthusiasm and the prospects of what could be done to help the world with this new technology. The power of education and those who deliver it. So there had been some anxiety, I remember this distinctly, there was a lot of press coverage, some anxiety around the technology at the time, with many in the science, as well as the broader community, talking about the ethics of tinkering with life itself and the potential for unknown consequences. It was a totally new paradigm. The science community imposed on themselves their own moratorium on this work, which lasted for about a year, from 1974 to 1975, until it was rigorously confirmed that there were appropriate safeguards built into the technology. The subsequent advances in all fields of biology could not have been remotely imagined in those early days. And we're here tonight to discuss just a few of the advances that were made in health, agriculture, and even mining, as well as some of the challenges along the way. So just a few words about the Biotech program for me. In 1997, I was an inaugural member. I came back from the UK, having done my PhD and become a lecturer at the University of London, and I came back in 1989 and the University of Queensland in 1991. And in 1997, I was inaugural member of the Board of Studies for what was at the time a new Bachelor of Applied Science in Drug Design and Development. And I noticed Leslie Luca in the audience before, because Leslie was on that group along with Marie Smith. And we were developing a new program. Ongoing input through 2000 and 2001 was required in the coordinated folding of this field of study, amongst others, into the broader area of biotechnology, with Ross taking over the reins. So I'd like to add my voice to the big shout out to Ross Barnard for his shepherding of the Biotech program over so many years. So I think the feature of Ross's leadership of the Biotech program, no reflection on current leaders who are doing a fantastic job, but there was just something special about the way Ross nurtured the students. I mean, many of you in the audience will have experienced that. It was an incredible environment that he established around the program. It was one of collaboration, collegiality, and as I said, mentorship directly from Ross. So Ross, I was significantly impressed over a significant large number of years, so well done. Let's not forget Steve Reed too. Let me just add in Steve and his contributions over the time as well. And as the VC has already mentioned, it's now a globally respected program, and it's hard to oversell this. UQ's position as number one in Australia, and as the VC said, it's been in the top 10 for a large number of years. It's quite extraordinary, really. So, to our panel tonight, in the past, present and future of biotechnology. Can I ask the panel members, one of whom may not yet be here? Trent. I was stretching it out for as long as I could. If I could ask the panel members to maybe come up and take their seats. And while they're doing that, I'm going to just throw at you some stats. Let me just highlight just how important this biotech sector has become, not just in Queensland, but in Australia broadly, and the impact we're having. Queensland's biomedical and life sciences industry currently contributes an estimated $2.8 billion in annual gross value added and employs around 14,000 people, with exports valued at approximately $569 million each year. The state is positioning itself as a globally competitive Asia-Pacific biomedical hub by 2027, supported by a strong ecosystem of innovative companies, world-class research institutions, advanced health precincts, and a highly skilled workforce, many of whom have come through the biotechnology program. We already host over 130 research organisations involved in biotechnology R&D, supported by a network of service providers in regulatory affairs, clinical trials, intellectual property, and finance. The government has invested heavily in building research capacity and translating innovation into commercial outcomes over many years, and particularly since the Smart State initiatives began in the 1990s under Peter Beattie's government. This includes exciting initiatives like the relatively recent $280 million Translational Science Hub, a partnership between Sanofi, the University of Queensland and Griffith University, which is establishing a global vaccine research hub here in Brisbane. Over the last 25 years, University of Queensland has generated more than 100 spin-out companies based on its research, with over 60% of these in biotechnology and the life sciences. Notable biotech spin-outs include Vaxis, progressing a skin patch for vaccine delivery, ViceBio, a vaccine biotech that has recently raised $150 million in capital to progress its leading vaccine candidates, Protagonist Therapeutics, Inflosome, and Spinifex Pharmaceuticals. Protagonist is now in excess of $1 billion company. Inflosome was acquired by Roche for $617 million, and Spinifex was acquired by Novartis in 2015 for $1 billion. With ongoing investment, biotech is emerging as a clear exemplar of a growing knowledge economy in this state. But it's not just about dollars. Let's not forget the prime reason we are all in this game. It's the reason I entered this game. The development of life-saving medical interventions for our wider community and contributions to global food security. It didn't take them long to get into their seats at all. But I think that provides a nice background and context for the discussion we're now going to have. Actually, while I'm taking my seat, why don't we start the ball rolling? I gave the panel members a bit of a warning about this. I asked them, let's start with a brief introduction of yourselves, particularly placing it in the context of UQ and the Biotech program, if you haven't, and naming one and why you've picked it. Name one biotechnology innovation or advance over the last 25 years that is impacting globally. Trent.
Thanks, Paul. So my name's Trent Munro. I'm an industry professor at the University of Queensland. I started life as a basic research scientist, and really, I think the initial wave of biotechnology essentially passed me by, even though I was working and living in Boston in the US and then Cambridge in the UK. I was so engrossed, I think, in the fundamental research that I was doing that I didn't really appreciate maybe what was happening, except to see all of these other postdocs and PhD students go to these companies. That all changed with coming back to Queensland and the emergence of smart state policy and the startup of AIDN at UQ, where I did get involved in biotechnology research and eventually led to work in a number of companies here and abroad. So that's why I'm here. I'm passionate about biotechnology as a tool and something that does have impact on people. In terms of, I think my answer, I could pick many, and we had a good discussion on this. I mean, I don't think I can really go past our ability to decode DNA as really one of the most singly important technologies that's happened. Sorry, got to get closer. If I think about that and my time in Boston at the start of the Human Genome Project, whatever it was, $1 billion, 10 years to decode the genome of one individual, you can now do that on the bench for less than $100. And that just really speaks to the power of biotechnology, the power of data, how those two things come together. I just think it's absolutely amazing.
Is this working okay? Yeah. I'm Elizabeth Aitken, or Liz Aitken. I'm Professor of Plant Pathology in the School of Agriculture and Food Sustainability. Been at UQ more than 30 years. And I've straddled in my teaching the BSc, the Bachelor of Ag Science, and the Bachelor of Biotech. So I have students coming from these different cohorts. And the biotech students always had that more applied-driven aspect to what they were doing, because in agriculture, working with plant diseases, it's so important that we can diagnose the pathogen and we can breed for resistance and use various tools to try and control these diseases. And since I did my postdoc, I've been working in areas looking at DNA and how we can help these plant pathogen interactions and solve the problems there. But when Paul asked, what biotech innovation has been most impactful in your area, I had multiple answers, and I've spoken to people who had multiple answers. But I think I'll still go back to my first one, and it's the use of molecular markers, the ability to look at the various inbreeding, which can be so complex, particularly in the orphan crops where we have had very little genetic improvement, even in 10,000 years, in what we use in farming, that we can now identify markers and help that breeding and improve plants. And because at the end of the day, we're 8 billion people, we need to improve our agriculture. We need to improve the quality of what we produce. We need to have less waste. And we've kind of plateaued using conventional methods, and we need to move on to the next step. So whether it's with molecular markers or with transgenics, etc., or using CRISPR, I'm sure we can help the farming and also the society over the next 100 years using these techniques.
All right. Thank you, Paul. My name is Ali. It took me 2 days to get here. If I'm a little bit sleepy, just bear with me. I was tempted to come. The last time I was here in Brisbane was 8 years ago, and when I saw there was a meeting for the alumni, I was tempted. But when I realized Ross was going to give a special speech, I just booked the ticket and came. So I'm really happy to be here. I'm really privileged to be part of this panel discussion. I did my master's and doctorate in Brisbane at UQ. In 2006, I graduated from the master's and did my doctorate in 2012. I've been with the Saudi FDA now for over 20 years. I have licensed and priced over 2,000 products into the Saudi market. Now I'm the head of the Saudi Pharmacopoeia, and I'm also the head of, or the co-chair for the Biosimilars Working Group with the ISH. And to answer the question, Paul, I think AI-based drug design and the combination of it with the CRISPR gene technology, I think these two will have the potential of having more safe and effective pharmaceutical products that are affordable and accessible to patients as soon as possible. So I'm really excited for the times coming. Nice to be here.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Kim Baker. I'm the General Manager of Patheon Biologics, which is part of the greater Thermo Fisher Scientific Group. We're a manufacturer of biotherapeutics, so think of us as high-tech brewers that instead of making beer, we make medicine, which we then highly purify, ready for injection into humans. My connection with the Biotech program precedes it being owned in its current home. I was actually year one of the ever first Biotech program ran at UQ. I think there were 4 of us that finished, and hopefully at least 1 or 2 of those are in the audience today. So I'm not going to tell you when that was, but it was a lot longer than 25 years ago, let's just say that. When I think of what, for me, has, in the bioprocessing industry, has really transformed the way we look at things, it's not just monoclonal antibodies, and we discussed that was a big one. But for me, I want to take you back to Dolly the sheep, because that was the first time that we showed we could clone a mammalian cell from an adult nucleus. And that's paved the way for what we call stem cell therapy, which really is starting to transform and enables us to provide personalized medicines for people with life-threatening illnesses today. It's also allowed us to really transform some of the industry. We can now grow organoids, little baby organs. You can see the little pulsing hearts, boop, 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 in a petri dish. And what that enables us is to do a lot more drug testing fail fast if it isn't going to work in vitro, but also it paves the way where we won't need to necessarily do animal testing in the future, but also provides better drug models so we see less effects when we get to that clinical trial stage. Transformative for me.
Thanks, Kim. I think we're finished here. That was really impressive. Well done. And I'm going to stick with you with our first question, and maybe also throw it to you, Trent, and anyone else who wants to answer. But it also picks up on something that the VC introduced, and that was the fact that industry and academia are working together. But historically, that's not been the case. Collaboration between academia and industry has been fairly poor, and particularly poor in Australia. And so while we're ranked highly for our R&D, our translation of innovative ideas into products and practice is one of the lowest in the OECD, and that is still the case. Are we seeing better engagement between academia and industry? What does that look like now, and is it having a difference?
For me, the answer is absolutely yes, and I have to say that because I do a lot of it.
Not you personally, but the wider.
But as I think what we see now is there is a lot more focus. We see institutes in the universities that are more applied focus. They are there to solve a problem, create a transformative route forward, applying those biotechnology solutions for better health outcomes, for example, as one. What we also see on the other side as industry, we actually are starting to realize we're not the experts at everything, and actually it's much cheaper, faster, and better to actually work with an academic colleague who's already got all of this skill set and has the innovation to hand to actually drive more collaborative outcomes for the betterment. What that means is we are now starting to keep more IP in Australia, and that for me is what is so transformational. We won't see Gardasil go offshore, and for those Gardasil, the Hep B vaccine is $5 billion a year. My plan exists because Ian Fraser had the vision that, and with Peter Beattie Smart State, had the vision that we needed to build sovereign manufacturing. And so I only exist because of that vision, which was about bringing those translational sciences and industry together. And with the investment of companies like Sanofi now, you're seeing that manifest and grow and grow and grow. So I think future's bright.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I also think we can't lose sight of that earlier part of the pipeline, and that's the innovation part, which happens with industry and happens with industry-university collaborations, but often happens in universities because people are doing blue sky research that don't actually have an end goal. But out of that research, and I'm sure we could all come up with our number one over the last 25 years that's come out of complete research that was completely not applied. So I guess we need to balance that important growing connection between industry and the universities with the strength of discovery research and how that also feeds.
Agree, you need both.
Exactly. Trent?
Oh, look, I was just going to say, I think we've got a long way to go, actually. And I think Australia probably still doesn't recognize the value, Australian industry doesn't recognize the value of doing R&D. And I've got my microphone on now, everyone, so sorry about that. And so that culture of doing R&D, the value of R&D, collaborating on R&D across all of our industries. There's some industry sectors that do it very well here. I think there's others that could do a lot better job. Where we've got a lot of room to grow in productivity. We've got a lot of room to grow in sovereign capability. Just a very short snippet, the company that I used to work for in California was established because it was equidistant between 3 universities in California. They recognized the value in the early 80s of that from a strategic location. I don't think Australian companies are thinking about their co-location with universities. That's what we need them to be thinking about, and that'll grow that natural sort of partnership that we all talk about between industry and academia, and then that flow-on effect that has on innovation.
Brilliant, thanks. Might move on to, I had a discussion with the panelists, and There have been some negative aspects of biotechnology over the years, but we didn't want to end with those, so we're going to deal with those up front. And Liz, I might throw to you. Those making new biotechnology breakthroughs and bringing them to market haven't always got it right. Looking back, is there a decision or direction you wish those harnessing biotech had taken somewhat differently?
Yes, I think the problem was when genetically engineered plants were first introduced into the community. I don't know the background in great detail, but it was sort of hit the community, and there was this Frankenstein food attitude. I was actually taken quite back by that. I thought, working as a plant pathologist, it was an opportunity to introduce genes from other species and make plants more resistant and reduce the amount of fungicides. I didn't see it from the community's point of view. And I think the fact that it was big companies, no disrespect to big companies, but it was seen from the community as big companies that were trying to profit out of this, and particularly with glyphosate and stuff. And it wasn't sold as well as it could. It wasn't sold at how it was such an environmental benefit. When you asked about one of the big things that had been very effective, I spoke to a colleague today, and he said, well, BT, of course. And the use of genetically engineering crops to introduce BT into them to make them insect resistant, meaning that you then didn't have to go and apply the sometimes quite nasty chemicals as a consequence, is a shame that's been so undersold. I think the community, we could have done a lot better to sell genetic engineering and not have pictures of pigs' ears on mice and stuff like that, which really shocked folk. I think, I don't know if we can wind it back. But with CRISPR, we need to, again, make sure it's sold to the community in a good way. I mean, on the other hand, maybe the fact that we've had to move on to CRISPR to avoid transgenics as such has led to a lot more innovation and development. But I do regret the fact that it wasn't sold well at the start. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess the irony is that many GMO plants are probably greener than their native counterparts.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Any other? I think we'll leave it at that and move on to positive things. So more around the biotech program and educational component. A highly skilled workforce is critical if we are going, and we've had this conversation many times, Kim, if we are going to significantly expand our local contribution to advancing biotech-based solutions. What skills and training do you think will be the most important for the next generation of biotechnologists? What are their gaps in their current training? And a follow-up, what advice would you give to students or early career professionals entering the field today? A number of questions in there.
I'm a little biased because I do the odd lecture teaching into the program, so I think that's fantastic. Strengths are really around, I think that Joe coined it perfectly earlier on. The course continues to evolve, take on new content and evolve with the progress of biotechnology in society. So very proud of what the course does there. In terms of potential gaps, something Joe and I have discussed more recently is around there is a global shortage of really well-trained analytical scientists. I have people ring me up globally asking me, do you have anyone you can spare? I have clients that ask me, can I train their scientists? So I'd say we could definitely look to beef up the analytical side, as well as I know we're evolving into a more biomanufacturing option later this year, which is also really exciting. In terms of what the program can, and whether it's the program or the university at whole, we need to focus on those soft skills that make those students, as they evolve, more readily employable for industry. And it's not just teamwork and collaboration, but it's the ability to problem solve and risk-based thinking, which is so critical, especially when you're working in the biotech space. the world is not black and white, everything is grey, and being able to evolve in that risk-based thinking. And also resilience, because like all science, things go wrong, and how fast you bounce back from a setback and get back in and keep going, for me, are those great skill sets.
Liz, any addition?
Yeah, I was just thinking that the program is good, but I think we need to get out to more students, not just those that are in the program. It's always been a concern, with science that students don't know more science. I think it would be a concern that science students don't know more biotech, because at the end of the day, they're going to be people voting, they're going to be people consuming, those are going to be the people receiving the benefits of all this medical innovation. They need to make an informed choice. And I know we want to cram so much information into our students' heads, but I think they need to know a general understanding. It can be quite, without giving too much away, but you're talking to particularly an ecology student, they might have a perception that all transgenics are bad. We need to make sure that everybody has a decent background of the basics, and then yes, of course, specialised for the biotech.
Certainly over the last, as an ex-head of school, we saw this transition, and whilst biotechnology was first taught primarily as a science-based discipline, there's been gradually over time an increasing component through connection with the business school, for example, in terms of entrepreneurship, science communication, which, when you're talking outside your science field, you're selling it, you're doing the 3-second elevator pitch sort of thing. Science communication is absolutely key, but certainly entrepreneurship and business skills are being taught as well, and possibly we could even enhance that further.
Paul, the only thing I was going to add is that we need to be really cognizant of how fast things are changing. And I think it was touched on before, but what used to be many years' work in the lab can now be done on a laptop in a few minutes. So these big changes I talked about it for DNA sequencing, the same thing is now happening for experiments. And so that joining together of data and science, it's been there for a long time, but it's reaching new levels. Then I think as we think about our training programs, recognizing the strengths we have at the university to make strides in that will probably also be critical, whether it's for employability, whether it's for industries of the future, something to pay attention to.
Yeah, we experienced that as we built a bioinformatics program. When we first was dealing with bioinformatics, the students we were getting were either mathematicians coming in that we had to teach biology to, or biology students that we had to teach maths to. We were seeing very few students come through who had both of those skill sets. The irony being, my daughter was one of them. She excelled in chemistry and maths at school. And when they get to university, or when they used to get to university, they tended to split them out, and they didn't maintain that cross-disciplinary training. So I think to some degree, David could possibly touch on this, that I think we've somewhat improved that, but I think you're right, that there's further room for improvement. One for you, Ali. Innovation, product development, manufacturing, business, entrepreneurship, all the things we've been talking about. It's only one part of a much bigger story in bringing an idea to a manufacturing possibility, to a product, and then commercial use. What are the most significant regulatory and ethical issues that biotechnology needs to address, and how are they doing that? How are people doing that?
Well, two things come to mind. The first one would be the unpredictability of the regulatory environment, and how soon the regulators, international regulators, can come to a consensus. And these two things are deterrents to investors, because it means that it will take a very long time for your investment to make money. And I will use biosimilars as an example. The first guideline that came out for the regulation of biosimilars was in 2005 by the European Medicine Agency. And at that time, it was required to have clinical endpoint studies to support the approval of biosimilars. we just had a meeting a couple of months ago, and the discussion is that science has advanced enough to show that clinical endpoint studies may not have added value to the development of biosimilars. So it was decided that the regulatory authorities now will update their guidelines so that it will not be required by default to have those studies. And the result of that, having that 20 years requirement, is that now we have something called the biosimilars void. In a recent report by IQV, it showed that in the next decade, there will be about 118 products that will go, 118 products, biotech projects that would go out of patent. Out of those 118, there is only 12 biosimilar products in development right now, and there is a missed opportunity for $200 billion US. Maybe something to work on, Kim, in your development. Yeah. The second one would be affordability and accessibility. The price of pharmaceuticals in the United States in the year 2023 have increased by 35% compared to 2022. Now, we are lucky that we have now gene therapies, cellular therapies that are disease modifying, and you just take one dose and you are treated. The difficulty is these products are really expensive and are not accessible to everyone. And unless the regulators can deal with these two difficulties, I think it will be hard for biotechnology to go ahead.
Could I even take that a step further? I think it's a really important point. So, for many in this room will be very familiar, maybe some not so much, that we have developed a range of potential therapies where we can actually use living cells as the drug. But the regulatory landscape has meant that the cost of producing those per patient, as Ali said, is typically in the many hundreds of thousands of dollars, even upwards of $1 million per dose. If we could find a way to make those therapies in a hospital, on demand, at the bedside, with automation, the cost could be comparable to more traditional therapies. But the regulatory landscape has not evolved to let us do that. It's almost holding some of this biotechnology back. So in many ways, we're a victim of our own success. I've been arguing, and I said this on a panel the other day, that I think the biotechnology industry has become too risk averse. Maybe that's a little bit controversial, but for some of these more advanced therapies, I think it's true.
Yeah, I think we have had that conversation many times. It's the difference between genuine risk assessment and being risk averse. And I think just in many disciplines, we are heading down that latter path, the risk aversion. If there's potential of one issue, then that impacts everything. So we need to get back to genuine risk assessment.
Can I add something that's new for this year and wasn't in effect last year? Is something really exciting coming out of the EMA, the European Drug Agency, as they this year have just said that you do not need to do phase 3 studies for biosimilars, and you can go straight from phase 1, which is there to just show that the product is safe, straight with additional characterization studies into patients. So that's just knocked about 5 years and many hundreds of $1 million off the drug development pathway. So yes, it doesn't keep up. I do agree with you, Trent, but there are some glimmer signs, I'm the eternal optimist, that they are responding, if slowly.
Thanks. I'm an appalling moderator. I forgot to mention at the start of this that, and we're nearing last couple of questions up here on the panel, but we're going to open it up for a Q&A for 20 minutes or so. And there is an option, if you hadn't noticed when you registered and you got the feedback, that you could ask a question online. I noticed there's one question, so have a think about that. I will probably ask from those, but if you've got another question, you can stand up and ask it, and that'll come shortly. This is a big one. QR code is up here. Thank you. I also don't look around. This is a big one, and this has been a relatively recent phenomenon. There's always been misinformation, but it's reached new heights lately. So the rise of misinformation and distrust of experts post-COVID-19 threaten the acceptance and implementation of many biotech advances. How can we most effectively navigate what appears to be a new normal? Ali, maybe start with you. Ali, yep.
Okay, I think the pandemic taught us that facts alone will not win the hearts and the minds of the people. I think we have to engage early. We have to invite into discussions before the products get to the market. And we need to use simple language to express the risks and benefits of such products. I think that's really important.
Yeah, it's been distressing for me to see, for example. I think in the first year or two after COVID, when things started to go a bit crazy on social media, that a lot of scientists were trying to explain calmly. Now I just see two camps with scientists shouting back at people, no, you're an idiot, this is what's true. And I think the key issue, you're right, we need to be empathetic. This is detailed and complex stuff, and we're the ones who can, through genuine science communication, through genuine empathy, can actually just continually tell the story. This is the reality. These are the truths. And I think we just need to continue to do that. And eventually, we may break through. Trent, I see you wanting to say.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think that we need to do something much more fundamental, and that is remind people what the scientific method is. These days we want to see fact, we want to see fiction, we want to see rules, we want to see certainty. And the reality is that that's not what science is. Science is coming up with a hypothesis and then doing a set of studies to make your best guess at, can you prove that to be true? Are there flaws in your hypothesis? What can you tell? What can't you tell? And that evolves over time. And I think it's that evolution of knowledge that's really, really hard for people outside science to understand, because they'll be like, well, 2 years ago you stood up and said this. Well, yeah, that was the best thing we knew at the time, but since then we've learned this, that you can't have that conversation. But if people understand the scientific method, as a fundamental to why we do this as scientists, I think it could be really helpful. I mean, I've struggled with this science communication question, as you know, over the last few years, and it's a really tough one, but we've got to do better.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think it's that science method. I mean, we don't need to teach people facts. We don't need to make sure that everybody is a scientist per se, but the process in which we get there, evidence-based decisions, is actually how everyone should be living their lives, right? So maybe we should make it a course alongside English that primary and secondary skills kids do. Evidence-based living. Challenging. No, I'm not going to do it. I was going to go there. Clearly, my heart and my passion is very much entwined within what happened with COVID-19, and it's just been extremely distressing to see just that we already were in a situation of a level of distrust of experts prior to COVID-19. I was buoyed by the fact in 2020 that people were listening. Experts were being listened to. Oh my God, it's turning. And then we've just gone back worse than what it was. And I'm desperate to get that back, and I'm looking for clues as to how we do it. But I think it just has to be the empathy. And you're right, it's a science method. It's what evidence-based analysis is all about. I think Karl Popper is no longer a favoured philosopher over in the US. So I learnt Karl Popper and his famous conjectures and refutations. And his principle was for science is you have to try and prove it wrong. Whatever you're doing, you prove it wrong. And if you can't, it must be right. Have a think about that. It's actually profound.
I think also having the right messenger to deliver the message, I think, is also important. Maybe they don't trust me or they don't trust you, but they trust people in their community. So I think that's also important.
Absolutely. Totally agree. Look, I had two questions. I am going to ask them. Sorry, Brenda. We will have some time for questions. But I'd like to finish off on a real high. And certainly, more recently, the biotech sector, and that includes food sustainability, has been really encouraged to grow locally. And there are lots of things on the horizon. This is definitely for you, Trent, in your current role, and you might like to just point out what that might be. But the local Queensland biotech ecosystem has grown substantially, as we've been talking about, particularly since the 90s. We're now seeing more industry players coming into the sector. I talked about Sanofi coming in as a partner with the local academic community. What are the prospects for building genuine precincts, the sort that we see in Boston and Cambridge and so on, that provide the environment for a collaborative, cohesive, end-to-end pipeline of what we were talking about at the start, innovation to products, the full pipeline?
Yeah, look, the reason I was a little bit late, I was just at an event over at Howard Smith Wharves talking about the power of precincts in Brisbane. It was great, had the Deputy Premier there. He's absolutely energised about the future of Brisbane, as was the whole room. And, I think we don't realise just what a privileged position we are in this city. If you look at our knowledge-based assets that we have, the type of workforce that we have, the lifestyle that we have, we've actually got all the ingredients to create something really, really special. And one of the things that was focused on there wasn't just amazing precincts like Howard Smith Wharves or South Bank, or what we'll create for a legacy in terms of the sports the sports arenas and complexes that will be brought online for 2032. But it's the industry-based precinct opportunities that we have to actually grow our economy. And that's something that I'm super passionate about. Something I'd say watch this space on. There's going to be a few things happening around that area. But I really believe that that's the compelling opportunity for us. When people come here, they see our collaborative spirit, they see our amazing facilities, they see the amazing people, and now we need to get them to stay here. We need the sticky part of that by creating regions, by creating clusters, by creating environments that companies can grow and prosper in. And I think that's the vision that we have, and that's going to be super exciting.
When are you running for Parliament? I'll vote for you. That is so passionate and so true. It really is exciting, exciting opportunities. Okay, our last question, then I will open it up to the audience. And Ali, you probably stole one that is this question rather than a past one, because you mentioned AI, which is going to revolutionise what we're doing into the future. I'm not going to skip you though. You might have to come up with another one. Looking ahead, what emerging technologies or fields within biotech do you believe will be the most transformative and that will define the next decade of biotech? Mike, start this side this time.
All right. Well, as you've all heard, I'm a bioprocessing geek. So my choice for the next 10 years is the rise of using bioprocessing to make manufactured meat. We're not quite there in terms of texture and taste yet, but we are seeing the emergence of that technology now. We have Vow that are based in Sydney. They're already got quail meat-based products on the market in Singapore, and they're going through the application process with the TGA here in Australia. We have Huros, and I apologise if I pronounce that incorrectly, that are based in Brisbane and working currently with some mouse cell lines and developing some cat food products at the moment, because what little pussycat doesn't want to eat a mouse? And then we also have another one, Magic, forgotten the name, sorry, based in Melbourne, that is developing lamb-like proteins. So it really is going to be a way where we can produce food for an ever-growing population in a more sustainable way. We need to make that more cost-effective as well, but I think that's got some exciting potential in the next 10 years.
Absolutely. We'll have to change those yearly lamb ads. Ali?
Yeah, it's still AI. Yep. I really think
AI twice.
Yeah. I think it will promote more accessibility, and it will make it much easier, especially with the deregulation of such archaic regulatory systems. And I think with time, the biotech projects will hopefully be more affordable and more accessible, and will move away from this traditional way of treating people to a more personalized medicine approach. Yeah, so I'm really hopeful.
I'll accept that. I mean, there are so many examples, but just the one that just blows my mind is the advances in AlphaFold. the fact that we can actually generate what appears to be a relatively reliable structure of a protein based on its sequence, when previously I'm not sure I ever believed that was going to be possible. So, David, you're looking at me as though, well, it's not quite there. Liz?
I guess continuing with genomics and CRISPR combined, I mean, we can tailor make our crop plants, we can make them more productive, we can make them more drought resistant, we can make them adapting to a changing environment and changing climate. So with all that information coupled with AI, because it's going to be a heck of a lot of information to digest, so we'll need AI to help us, but we can manipulate things more and hopefully make it acceptable to the community.
And just things like James Dale's advances who's been working for so long on plant GMOs in QUT and his vitamin plant. So in poor countries, getting vitamins through GMOs that are now expressing those sorts of elements.
I agree on the AI. I'm going to take a slightly different tack though. So I don't know if people in this room know of a gentleman named Nubar Afayan. So he was a refugee family, went to the US, ended up getting into MIT, and then founded a company called Flagship Pioneering, which was really one of the most innovative and remains today one of the most innovative venture capital firms that exists in the US. And they're always trying to invest in sort of the next frontier. And if you really want to read something interesting, I would encourage people to go onto the website and read his recent letter to investors or letter to the community. And he's coined a new term in that letter, which I really love, and it's called polyintelligence. And I think that's really where the future lies, not relying on just one tool or one source, but leveraging everything we have to try and search for the most complex answers, the answers to the most complex problems. And I just thought that was really fascinating. So, he's not saying that it's just going to be an AI drug discovery company. There's going to be other components to it, but we're really at that nexus. We're at the nexus of compute power. We're at the nexus of data analysis. We're at the nexus of learning. So I think that connectedness and that polyintelligence, that's what I'm super excited about.
Brilliant. Okay, Brenda's really looking daggers at me because I haven't given you, I'm making that up, because I haven't given you enough time to Q&A. I've just refreshed my screen and suddenly you're engaged. So there are lots of questions up here now, but I'm going to give the first one to Adrian Pennell because he was the first one up. And I think it's an easy one, and I'll ask everybody. When biotech in Australia was emerging as an industry sector in the 80s, practitioners were biochemists, microbiologists, and molecular biologists, and sometimes all three. Now we have degrees in biotechnology. Is biotechnologist a profession? Anyone? I think the answer is yes.
Of course it is. When I did the degree, it was a hybrid of microbiology, biochemistry, and chem-eng. And I can tell you, and I'm sorry to SCMB, but, fourth year chem-eng was my favourite year, doing those subjects, because I got to do bioreactor design and become the bioprocessing geek I am today. But I still use the foundations of the rest of it. And it's about that, to the point of scientific method, that you learn how to think. You don't just learn content. The program teaches you how to think outside the box, take in those other elements to come up with an informed decision.
Agreed. So we've got one here on health and medical biotech is clearly thriving in Australia. Do you think the environment to develop other types of biotech, such as industrial biotech, is there? Noting it now mostly consists of startups and VC funding is scarce. Trent?
Oh, I would say absolutely. And that's probably where the future is. I mean, for those who don't know, at University of Queensland, aside from the amazing work we're doing in food and agriculture, we're also doing some incredible work in the industrial space, engineering organisms to deal with waste products from the mining industry and turn that into value. Recent announcement on collaboration with some large mining companies to do that. I mean, that area has struggled to find commercial value for the last sort of 10, 15 years. Maybe we've been looking in the wrong places. I think that if you're looking for an area to invest, don't take investment advice from me, but that's an incredible area, and I think is ready to boom. So the answer clearly yes.
Yeah, agreed. And please note that disclaimer. It might come back to bite you, that one. Given the meeting you've just been in, I might throw back to you. I've seen one here. Liz touched on branding being important, Franken crops and what they were called back in the day. We want Brisbane to be a global, publicly recognised biotech hub, and we don't want why in Brisbane questions when our spun-out companies establish here. Is there any buzz around harnessing the Olympics and that 2032 endpoint when we'll have the global eye? So what's the plan there?
Oh, look, I mean, I think so. I mean, when we go and visit cities, as tourists, it's always sort of amazing what your eye catches. And, I think we've got a real opportunity here. Yeah, people are going to come for that. They're going to spend time because they're here for this event. But there's an absolute opportunity for them to see the other amazing things that are doing. And whether that be, imagine we could get people to go and see TRI. I don't know how many people here have been to the Translational Research Institute. When you walk into that atrium, it's really one of the most spectacular buildings in Brisbane. And think about the impact you could have if you could explain and connect with the amazing medical research that's going on there. And there's many such examples. So I think there's a huge opportunity that we have to engage our visitors in more than just the sport, but all the other parts of the economy and why this is a good place to be. So absolutely.
All right. We've got 4 minutes left, and I will be ending exactly on time. Sort of sounds like I'm fearful. Not meant. Not meant. Do you think the views of policymakers in terms of funding and regulations change towards biotech industry in Australia after COVID? Kim? Yeah.
Policymakers, funders. I see improvements in funding, but it's very slow. In terms of COVID, I mean, there are 2 people sitting on this stage that put science and made science sexy for the first time in 30 years. So I think either Paul or Trent should be answering that as the people that made the front page of the Courier Mail.
We were either 3 wise men or what was the other?
Revenge of the Nerds.
Revenge of the Nerds. We were nerds, that's right.
Love.
I remember that one.
But I think there's been a huge amount of, the thing that's tossed around is our figure on where we sit on the OECD table for our lack of R&D spend, right? We're always saying that we're way down. The reason we're low is not because of our granting agencies. It's because of what I said before. It's because of the lack of R&D spend within industry. And so I think there's a huge opportunity. We're seeing that come, with all levels of government talking about productivity gains, talking about the importance of sovereign capability, being able to meet our own needs. So I think those things are critical for science, and it's an opportunity. So we've got to respond to those, create the solutions, not just go asking for the dollars. So I think there's a big shift. There's an R&D review going on in this country that all of us have tried to comment on, and so look, I think it's super positive.
Yeah, agreed. I'm going to ask 2 more. One of them fun, and the other one informative. If you had a spare $100,000 to invest in an Australian biotech company, who would that be? Trent?
I'm definitely not answering that.
All right, let's move on to the one that I think is a really good question. Looking back across your careers, what would be the top 3 pieces of advice you would give to biotechnology students looking to graduate in 2025?
Stay optimistic. It is a burgeoning future out there, and there are a lot of jobs. If they're not there today, they're coming. Yeah. I think also work. Yeah, I'll pass over, and 2 others from 2 others. 3 others.
I remember what Steve Jobs said, stay hungry, stay foolish, and keep going, work hard, and keep an open mind. I go back to the question, is biotechnology a profession? I think the near future, the definition of profession is going to be changing, and a lot of professions will disappear in the near future. So I think keep an open mind and stay flexible.
Liz?
I would say remain flexible, be prepared to work in different fields, but to apply the same tools or new tools, but to remain flexible.
I mean, every single student I talk to says, what should I do? Should I work in academia or industry? It's completely the wrong question to ask. I mean, so it's follow your passion and recognize your strengths. So I have 2, not 3, but if you do that, you're going to be successful.
I'll add a third one to that because mine more passion and have fun. I don't think it's in the curriculum, but if you're not having fun, it may not be for you. I had fun during my undergraduate degree. I really enjoyed it. And I suspect all of you did too. All right. And on that note, we might fold. But so can I just ask you all to thank, I think this has been a great conversation. Thank you for our panel members and the insights that they provide. Thanks, everyone. And while they're disappearing off the stage, I would ask David Asher if he would like to come up and close.
Thank you very much to the sexy Paul for moderating the last section. And to our fantastic panel, Kim, Liz, Ali and Trent, who battled rain, disappearing from other meetings, and the traffic outside to be here today for such a riveting and thought-provoking discussion. If you have more questions, and I'm sure you've got some just like I do, or just want to continue the conversation, I encourage you to approach our speakers over refreshments. They'll be around, and I'm sure they'll be happy to answer any of your questions. And of course, a heartfelt thanks to all of you for being here today. The 25th anniversary has meant a lot to the people at the coalface of the program. It's something we've been looking forward to for a long time. And to see how it's all resonated with all of you here today has truly been an amazing experience for us to be part of with you. So thank you for being here. We recently completed a 7-year review of the Biotech program, and one thing was really clear. You are one of our greatest strengths and assets of the program. As we look ahead to the next 25 years, we're excited by the many ways that you can continue to be part of this journey, whether it's by offering feedback about things we should be doing new, mentoring our students, contributing to the teaching, hosting research projects or internships, or just simply sharing where your journeys have taken us. We really encourage you to stay part of the program moving forward. Another way that you can think about being part of the program moving forward is that we're really proud to announce the launch of the Ross Bernard Learning Enrichment Awards. Many of you will know Ross as a tireless champion of real-world, out-of-classroom learning. This new endowment, which is named in his honour, will open doors for students to engage in internships, attend conferences, and explore international opportunities. These kinds of transformational experiences don't just change the lives of the students, they help shape the future of our biotechnology in Australia. They empower students, strengthen our industry, and reinforce the bridge between education and industry. And I think there's more information at the link above me. Now, while I've been asked to close the formalities for today, our celebrations are far from over. Tomorrow, we invite you to join us at St Lucia for a series of exciting activities, including lab tours, a mentoring lunch, and the much-anticipated Ross Bernard lecture on science as a process. And we just heard today about how important it is to educate people more broadly about science as a process. I think a lot of you will know Ross, and he's not just a true legend of biotechnology at UQ, but he has a very insightful and deep understanding about that scientific process, and there'll be a rare opportunity to hear some of his uniquely insightful perspectives. But for now, Please stay longer, enjoy some refreshments, continue the fantastic conversations that we all started beforehand, and thank you again. And here's to the next 25 years of biotech at UQ.